come and join me? We'll teach the world to fly. Will you come and join me? I'll fly you to the sky. Jump on in, it's time to fly. Let imagination go on. Jump on in and take my hand. Run a little bit till you catch the wind. Run a little bit till you catch the wind.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Elevate Your Leadership podcast with me, your host, Bob Pizzini. Hopefully, you've listened to previous episodes of my podcast, and if you have, you know that I love to have guests on who not only bring great value to me and my organization, but I know they're going to bring great value to you and your organization. And today's guest is no exception. Today's guest is retired Admiral Paul Becker. Paul served the country faithfully in the intelligence community for 30 years before moving on and starting his own business, teaching and training in leadership. And he's a professor at the Naval Academy. And I'm just going to go ahead and read his bio, and then we're going to have a great discussion with Admiral Becker. Paul Becker is a former Naval Intelligence Officer, senior executive, board member with a unique combination of business, military, cybersecurity, and leadership experience. As the CEO of the Becker T3 Group, he leverages an outstanding network of security leaders to provide an understanding of national security trends and activities. My graduate degree is national security, by the way.
What?
He successfully developed and implemented all-source business and intelligence strategies for large, diverse international teams. Paul served in peace, crisis, and combat, with the majority of assignments in the Pacific, Southwest Asia. I've been there for about 5 or 6 years. Europe and Washington, D.C., a true combat zone. He holds a current top-secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information security clearance. From 2016 through 2017, Paul led the Presidential Transitions Intelligence Community Landing Team, working closely with leaders from the Boston Consulting Group, Go Bruins, which provided policy input, strategic guidance, and operational counsel to a new administration. Specific military service includes Director of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he was the Principal Intelligence and Cybersecurity Advisor to the Chairman, the U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii, the International Security Assistance Force Joint Command in Afghanistan, Commanding Officer of the Department of Defense's largest Joint Intelligence Operations Center at U.S. Central Command in Tampa, and Assistant Naval Attaché to France. We're going to talk about what it's like to be the Naval Attaché to France. It just sounds cool. So he successfully managed multi-million-dollar budgets, led large, high-performance teams through critical startups, organizational restructuring, and growth. Paul is the member of a NASDAQ-listed corporate board, president of a nonprofit board, a member of several boards and advisors in his leadership, and is a leadership professor at the U.S. Naval Academy. He holds a Master in Public Administration from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and a Bachelor of Science from the U.S. Naval Academy. A dynamic public speaker and author, his articles and presentations have been widely published. Almost there, last paragraph. Rear Admiral Paul Becker is the recipient of the National Intelligence Community and Department of Defense's Distinguished Service Medals and the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. The Naval Intelligence Community recognized Rear Admiral Becker in 2016 by establishing the Teamwork, Tone, and Tenacity Leadership Award in his honor, and he calls that T3, and we're going to dig into that. Rear Admiral Paul Becker, welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast.
Thank you, Bob. Pleasure to be with you.
That's what everybody says. So interesting professional life, incredible, and we're going to dive into a lot of these aspects. One thing I've learned through doing this podcast and through writing my book is we become largely who we are in the first 18 years of our life. So can you tell us where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Sure. I grew up in the Bronx. I was one of 4 boys. My dad was a cop, an NYPD cop, and my mom was a mom. And we lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment till I was 9 years old. So I understood the value of teamwork early on, if for nothing else, trying to get to that one restroom. All 4 of my grandparents immigrated to the United States from Eastern Europe in between World War I and World War II.
What countries?
Combination of Russia, Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. The borders were rather porous back then, so these are Jewish immigrants, and they're lucky they made it out when they did. So my parents are both first-generation Americans. So I lived in the Bronx till I was 9, and then we moved to the suburbs of Long Island, a town called Deer Park. And I graduated from high school there and joined the Navy, entered the Naval Academy right after that.
That's awesome.
Why the Navy? I had seen enough television and big screen films of what the Army and the Marine Corps did in combat in World War II or Korea. And I said, that's really dangerous. But there was this Lieutenant Commander Quentin McHale, who seemed to be having a good time in the South Pacific with his little Navy, and he was still in the war, right? But there was some hijinks as well.
Yeah.
And I thought that'd be a good thing to pursue if I've ever needed. And then when my father explained the Becker family financial facts of life to me and asked which service academy I'd be applying to, it was an easy choice to go Navy. Thank goodness I was accepted. I'm not sure I would be nowadays. But I had good athletics, good civic involvement, good extracurricular activities, good sports, and it was a happy location for me.
Yeah, that's great. So Paul is referring to McHale's Navy for our listeners who are probably 55 and younger. You can check out those episodes on YouTube. It's a very, very entertaining show. I watched it as a kid as well. Did you have a job or jobs in high school?
I had 2 jobs in high school. I worked in a Baskin-Robbins ice cream parlor in 10th to 12th grade, and I was also a Little League umpire. At $5 a game, I learned a lot about maintaining a positive outlook or tone, as I'd call it, along the way, and it gave me some good exposure, right, to some aggressive crowds, right, mostly coaches and parents. And it was I loved doing that. It was $5 a game, which was good money back in the 70s. And my backup plan, if I didn't get into the Naval Academy, was to go to a state school in New York and then go down to umpire school in Florida. Wow. I really admired them because they played it fair.
That is cool. So your ulterior plan was to be a professional baseball umpire.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's good. Good to have a plan B, but plan A worked out for you pretty well.
But there were some carryover skills that I was able to use later on as an intel officer. It's call them as you see them, right? That's the umpire's motto.
Balls and strikes, and outs.
When a boss would ask you, what do you think of this situation as an intel professional? Well, here's what I know or don't know. Here's what I think, perhaps, but here's how I see it. They're asking you for your advice, right? As an intel professional, you're not asked to deliver the facts. Facts may be part of what you discuss, but it's what you think. What happened here, and it was a valuable skill set.
Okay, so some processing, some analysis of events or information. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So how did you select
I wanted to go to flight school. The Navy told me I had one too many surgeries along the way, so you'll become an intel officer instead. That didn't make me happy at first. I had to channel my inner stoic and do the best with the situation as was presented to me. There are things you can control and things you can't control. I teach the Stoics now to midshipmen. If they've not had this experience yet, it's a valuable lesson. And there are some great leadership role models who were, at the apex, of what a Stoic, believed.
And can you, just for the listeners, can you define Stoic real quick?
Yeah. The Stoics were a school of philosophy from ancient Greece, founded by a former slave who definitely knew what he could control and not control, later gained his freedom, named Epictetus. And it's a school of philosophy that you should focus on what you can control versus what you can't control, and take ownership of what you can control. So a lot of similarities to elevating your leadership.
Thank you for that. Reference to my book there, folks. Thank you for that.
Probably the most famous of those Stoics was Marcus Aurelius. There are podcasts and websites from daily Stoic philosophers for the here and now. Probably the most famous military adherent to the Stoic philosophy in our lifetimes was Vice Admiral James Stockdale, the Medal of Honor winner, and the senior prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam era. And Admiral Stockdale learned about the Stoics as a master's student, as a commander in the Navy, but he had to apply it, as he said to himself as he was shot down over Vietnam. I'm leaving the world of technology, and I'm entering the world of Epictetus, the founder of the Stoic philosophy. So focus on what I can control, not on what I can't control.
That is probably the most extreme, I guess, example of stoicism, to only control what you can control as a prisoner of war. Wow.
And he was willing to give his life. I mean, this includes you can control the taking of your own life. And when he felt he was perilously close to dishonoring his flag, his country, his fellow prisoners, he tried to commit suicide rather than betray them. And the Vietnamese, thankfully, revived him, but they changed their whole paradigm of torture and deprivation when they realized that this man was willing to sacrifice that much for what he believed in, that they started treating American prisoners of war different because of him, a real servant leader. I'm sure we'll get to different types of leadership and what is leadership, but Stockdale, the ultimate servant leader, but based in the school of the Stoics.
Wow. So, man, we just went
off script.
No, this is fascinating, though, and this is why I love to do this podcast and have these discussions and share this incredible information. So, baseball umpire in high school, Baskin-Robbins in high school. Any inspirational leaders? You said you were athletic. What was your sport?
I ran. I was a good runner. I played everything. I was average height, average speed. So I wasn't, I got varsity letters in high school. That doesn't translate to NCAA level sports. But it made me realize that there are things I can control, right? Sense of humor, right? Intellect, personality, right? These are things that I could control and cultivate, and that served me well over time versus, I'm not Tom Brady, right? I'm not tall, I'm not good looking.
Can't throw a football a mile and a half.
I don't have, supreme athletic skills, but I've got some skills. All right, so it was a focus at not being a gifted athlete, actually played to my advantage to being a good, well-rounded naval officer.
Sure. Well, I think what you just said is critical, too. You recognize your strengths and capitalized on them and recognized your weaknesses and didn't waste a lot of time crying over the fact that you're not going to be an NCAA Division I player. So no, that's critical. So from either high school jobs or sports, were there leaders in your past that stand out to you, people that you reflect back on today?
Yeah, a combination of fictional leaders and real life leaders. Typical parents, for the 60s and 70s perhaps, they'd sit my brothers and I down in front of the television set, and they'd babysit us by saying, "Don't move." So I saw a lot of TV. Sure. Right, so John Wayne movies, whether in the West or whether playing someone in the military, right? Gregory Peck and Jimmy Stewart, and these type of cinematic, charismatic leaders. Then out getting into the theaters, later 60s, 70s, the Clint Eastwoods, and so. But I'm also a fan of history, and they could be statesmen or stateswomen leaders. But to start with the statesmen, the Mount Rushmore of our leaders, right? Roosevelt and Jefferson and Washington, right? These are people that I admired historically, that put the weight of a country at times on their back. Then once I became an older teen and into my younger 20s and became more well-read, I realized you didn't have to be a charismatic, good-looking movie star or president to be a leader, right? There's Harriet Tubman, who I learned about and admired, Susan B. Anthony, Margaret Thatcher, Jackie Robinson, Martin Luther King, right? An inclusive stretch, of the American experience. And these are people that I still read about, think of, admire, and write about.
And talk about, obviously. Those are great examples, too, but I like the way you said the American experience, because that's so key to enabling people like that to rise above and allow their true talents to come out and benefit other people. Along those lines, how does Paul Becker define the word leadership?
Yeah, I'll start with it's a process. It's not an act. Some people are called leaders. That's fine. It's just a label. It's not a position, right? It's a process of getting a group of people to achieve a common, preferably positive goal. There's academic debate on, was this evil person a leader? Well, this person motivated a group of people to achieve evil. It's just not my definition. So since you asked what's my definition, I'll put in with a positive goal, okay? So a process to get a group of people to achieve a common goal. Now, there are a lot of subsets of that. That's rather umbrella type statement. Well, how do you do it? That's the what, a leader does. And, how do you do it? And 30 years in the military, years before that, admiring fictional or real-life sports heroes, military heroes along the way, I kept notes. I have notebooks full of, this was good.
Your little green military flip book?
We all have them in the military, and I've got a stack of them still at home. This was not good. And you put that together, and I had time to read quite a bit of it, during some medical maladies towards the end of my career. And the three big bins that I found the great leaders had compared to just the good leaders is that they were exceptional in these areas: teamwork, tone, attitude or culture or atmosphere, and tenacity, right? Admittedly, there's some alliteration here, right? There are other synonyms that go along with them, but a leader should try and make, their comments and actions repeatable, memorable, and alliteration's a part of that. So teamwork, tone, tenacity, T3. It's short, it's memorable, it's actionable, similar to what we knew in uniform as commander's intent, right? When the poo hits the fan, you don't have time to read the checklist of what am I supposed to do here. It's what am I supposed to remember? There's training, there's education, and there's action involved. And I thought T3, teamwork, tone, tenacity, short, actionable, memorable leadership guidance.
Wow. Okay. So your experience kind of allowed you to centralize or to consolidate really through those three words: teamwork, tone, and tenacity. And for you, everything kind of flows from there.
These are big pins. There's a lot involved in teamwork, and I picture them as a triangle, right? And the best leaders need a shape. If you just have two out of the three, any two, it's not a figure. It's just two lines, and they'll collapse on themselves. You need some structure. It's not always an equilateral triangle either. Sometimes, if I remember my geometry right, it's a scalene triangle, right?
He said scalene triangle. We might have to delete that. I'd rather you said...
But not every leadership situation's the same. I've entered organizations where their teamwork is exceptional, but their tone stinks, right? No one likes each other, they're not friendly, but they seem to get along at some point, and they're awful hardworking. So I don't have to reemphasize the need for tenacity, and grit and resolve. They've got that already. But let's work on how we can improve the interpersonal relationships, and this is a key. This is a key trait of a leader. You emphasize it in your book as well. Is a leader needs to know what's the big priority, right? You don't do as a leader what you're best at. There's a reason you may be good at X, Y, and Z. But in the situation that you're in, if you're involved with a group of people and a process to try and get them to achieve a goal, you may be good at something, but it's not applicable here. So you need to identify the key task. You need to prioritize that and develop a plan, even though you may not have familiarity to get after it. And that's leaders recognize what needs to be done and get after that.
Yeah. You mentioned towards the end of your career that you face some medical challenges. Can you share that with us?
Sure. I'm a cancer patient, and I'm a cancer survivor. In 2014, I was the intel officer, or the J2, for the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. A few months earlier, I had just run the Honolulu Marathon. I was fit, and I thought I was healthy, but I had a knee pain that just wasn't going away. And like many military personnel, my idea of medicine was Motrin, Tylenol, ice, and heat. The fifth element. I finally got an MRI and an X-ray. I went to see the orthopedic doctor as a follow-on, and in the room was him. With him was another doctor. He introduced him as my colleague, the orthopedic oncologist. I know what that meant. He said, let's take a look at your X-ray. And I had a tumor that extended probably about 3/4 of my right femur. And they said, this is an indication, of bone marrow cancer. We're going to need to take a biopsy to be sure. I try and diffuse situations with humor. It's my default, probably from reading too many Mad magazines when I was growing up. I said, is there any chance the X-ray tech could have spilled mayonnaise from his hamburger? And no, we don't develop film that way anymore. biopsy. Okay, you have bone marrow cancer. It's rather late staged. On a scale of 1 to 4, you're at a 4. And my only thought was, who came up with this fakakta system of 1 through 4? In America, we go to 10. Everything's based on 10. People's looks, David Letterman's list of funny things. 4. He goes, well, the Europeans, actually. That explains it, there. So starting in January of 2015, I went through surgeries to save my legs, save my life. I had 2 cardiac events, not because of cholesterol or stress, but my body was under such shock. I went through stem cell transplant, multiple other procedures, and thank God, and thank family, and thank fitness, that I entered the fray with. I came out okay at the end, and the Navy offered me the chance to get back in the ring, but that was my V8 moment. There's a time for everyone to leave the service, whenever that was, and that was my time in 2016. I wasn't medically discharged, so I'm stable. I'm not, remission's not the right word, but it's, there's no cure for multiple myeloma or bone marrow cancer. There is a treatment, and I get those treatments 3 times a month, and, I've said it several times because I'm a believer that, thank God, here I am.
Yeah. So you are currently receiving those treatments 3 times?
Normally at Walter Reed in Bethesda, but while I'm here, I've got an away treatment regime at Portsmouth Naval Hospital.
That's great. That's great. So you're maintaining that treatment. Are you back to running?
I can't any longer. I still have that. I have a titanium plate that holds together my femur. And
what did you replace that with? Clearly, you're still in great shape, so you're doing something.
I swim for an hour, probably 6 days a week, and and probably biking, the other spare times.
All right, yeah. Swimming is just incredible. It's a full body workout every single time. It's cardio. I think it's one of the best things that people can do. Wow. And while we're talking about that, I know your brother served this nation honorably. And he's no longer with us. Can you tell us about him and about that?
Yeah, very proud of my younger brother, Adam, one of my 2 younger brothers. Adam, like many younger brothers, said, I'm going to go on a different course from you, the role model older brother, and there's no need for me to get a commission. I'm just going to enlist in the military, and I'll become an officer on my own. And he was right. And he enlisted in the Marine Corps, and he was a military policeman. And he was an embassy security guard on a couple of different assignments, Cyprus and Malaysia. He was an elite athlete, Bob. Let me tell you what kind of elite athlete he was. After he came in second in the Malaysian National Triathlon when he was a Marine security guard in Kuala Lumpur. Then he got out of the military for a while from active duty before he came back in as a reservist. And the Marine Corps would only recall him to active duty for the inter-service athletic championships. So he was on the Marine Corps cross-country team, he was on the Marine Corps swim team, he was on the Marine Corps triathlon team. And he would always place, in these big events. So he was that kind of an elite athlete. And we only served together once, and it was in Afghanistan. And it was in 2009 to 2010.
Okay. I think you posted a picture of you and him in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, it was a very happy moment. I was in Kabul, the capital, northeastern part of the country. He was in Kandahar, south central part of the country. But I would travel the country as the intel officer for the ISAF, International Security Assistance Force Joint Command. So one trip, we timed it. We were together. Took a picture. It made my dad very happy, right, to see his boys out there.
That's incredible. Okay, and then he developed what was his malady? That
because he was an elite athlete, he had some outpatient knee surgery as a Department of Defense civilian working in England. a couple of years ago, and there were just complications from the surgery, and he expired there in England, and it was devastating. It was during peak COVID, couldn't travel to be with his widow, but I had a nice network of former British battle buddies and shipmates that could attend, and they filmed a memorial service. He's since been inurned in Arlington Cemetery, and I can visit him several times a year.
Yeah, well, that's great. What a humbling experience it is to visit Arlington, and unfortunately, I've got several teammates there as well, and I just the honor and respect that the country pays to its service members by entombment or burial at Arlington is
it's my favorite of the national monuments, and I've been in and out of D.C. over the years. When people ask, "Hey, old guy, what's your favorite D.C. monument?" I only got an afternoon or something. I said, go to Arlington Cemetery because it's the people's monument. I mean, they're all people's monument, but these are real people. Now, you may know some of them, or they may be from your town, or you may know these, historic figures, and that's worth your time. That's the American experience.
That's wow. If you're listening, folks, and you heard what Paul just said, and you're in D.C. and you have time to see one major site or one major monument, please make it the Arlington National Cemetery. With that, we are going to take a break. Paul is a good capitalist, and so am I. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Paul's consulting work and a little bit more on T3. Back in a minute. And we are back. We are talking to Rear Admiral Paul Becker, Rear Admiral retired Paul Becker. Paul served our country in the intelligence community in the U.S. Navy for 30 years. And upon completion of his career, he continued to teach and to educate and to focus on leadership. Paul, tell us a little bit about your transition and what you're doing with your T3 framework.
I was sure when I left the Navy, I did not want to work for another defense industrial giant. A lot of senior military personnel, officer and enlisted, enter that defense industrial space, and it's the nature of our system. They're needed there, right? They've got expertise. It's lucrative, frankly.
Yeah, very low risk, good job security.
But I just worked for a defense industrial giant for 30 years. I didn't want to do it for another 30 years, and I have nothing against those that do. It just, I wanted to challenge myself and set off on some new adventures. So I thought about, what gets me excited, right? Like in sports, you can't teach speed. In the leadership business, you can't teach enthusiasm. What enthused me? What motivated me? What inspired me? And it was the study and the practice of leadership. So there are plenty of role models I've had of former military personnel that talked about lessons they learned in uniform that apply to the corporate sector as well. So I started the Becker T3 group, Teamwork, Tone, Tenacity, as a consultancy with a focus on corporate clients and also medical clients because of my unique medical background, both as a patient, right, and as a senior officer and a leader in the day, a lot in common with senior medical personnel on how you collect, analyze, disseminate, and share news, with your patients, right?
F3 EAV.
Warfighters, yeah. So started that, and we lived in Alexandria, Virginia, as a suburb of Washington, D.C. And in addition to consulting companies in the intelligence community, in the corporate sector, in the Department of Defense, in the medical sphere, I started teaching leadership at the University of Virginia's Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy, and it was a circuitous route to get there. I was on a business trip to Tokyo from Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. There's a direct flight. It's a long flight. You may have taken it in the day. It's 14 hours, point to point, and sitting next to me was the dean of the school. And 14 hours is plenty of you could take an 8-hour sleep and still have 6 hours to talk to the fella next to you. And we got to talking about sports, politics, media, entertainment, leadership, national security affairs, and particularly about the leadership. He said, as we parted our ways, would you mind coming to give a lecture during lunchtime? We have a series in Charlottesville, Virginia. I said, with pleasure. Thank you. An honor. So I did that that fall. Afterwards, he hosted me to lunch, and he said, could you turn that lecture into a semester-long course? Because we're a school of leadership, and these are lessons that these master students need to hear, and we don't have any former military officers on our faculty. I said, are you sure people usually ask me to speak less, Dean, not more. But yes is my answer. I can do this. And I developed my own curriculum, and I taught there for 3 years until he wasn't the dean of the school, right? He wasn't the dean of the University of Virginia. He was the dean of the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. So like in Ryder Cup golf, the captain gets a certain number of select picks for their staff as an adjunct professor. I'm not a PhD type professor. So there was a new dean, and new dean selects their team, and I get it. Just so happened, one of my colleagues, an old shipmate from Bahrain, a retired Navy SEAL named Roger Herbert, was a leadership professor at the Naval Academy at this point. He said, hey, I heard you're no longer at the Batten School in Charlottesville. Would you like to teach at the Naval Academy? And I'm now starting my 4th full year teaching leadership to the youngsters or the sophomores at the Naval Academy. The short name of the course is called Ethics. The longer name is Ethics and Moral Development for Naval Leaders.
Wow, that's incredible. And did you live in Annapolis already?
No, we lived in Alexandria, but during COVID, I realized for my clients that I was consulting with, either they didn't want to or they could not, even if they wanted to, meet with people in person. My wife and I have lived in Annapolis before. It's a little greener. It's a little bluer than Northern Virginia. It's a happier place for me, Naval Academy grad as well. So we moved, when the roads were empty, when everyone was staying home, we kind of did it yourself move to Annapolis, and we're very happy to be back there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it is a wonderful place, especially, I would say, spring and fall. Winters can be kind of like they are here in Virginia Beach. We're coming to you, by the way, from the broadcast studios located on the top floor at iFly Virginia Beach, right down here at the oceanfront in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And Paul did not get a chance to fly. Normally at this point in the discussion, I ask you how your flight experience was, but Paul's time here is brief, and we are actually completely sold out, completely booked. But we'll get you in another time.
Yeah, that's a good metric that you're completely booked, but rain check accepted. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long have you been adjunct with is it adjunct with the Naval Academy?
Adjunct professor, the mid's often at, what do we call you, sir? Well, there's a range of options, whatever you're comfortable, but an adjunct professor.
Yeah, okay. And I was adjunct with American Military University for about 3 years. And the last class I actually had, it was like mid-classes when I got deployed to Iraq. And so I had to wrap that thing up between firefights. It was pretty interesting, but we got it done.
We adjunct professors, we have better stories than some of those stodgy old PhD professors. Yeah, and true enough, they take a very academic, approach. I mean, Stephen Covey or Angela Duckworth, they have academic approaches to leadership topics, right? But but so does General Stan McChrystal or General Colin Powell, right? It's a different practitioner's view, of it.
And they should be different. And that's kind of one of the things that I write about is I don't think any two leaders should be the exact same, because we're human beings, and there's a human component to how we apply our leadership. And to your point of stoicism, if you identify your internal strengths, then you can use those appropriately.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. There's an exercise I use with some of my audiences, and I have them fill in the blank. Great leaders, not just leaders. Think about fictional, real life. Great leaders, fill in, and that's it. One word. You can only use one word. Or I'll give them the R. Great leaders are, for example, empathetic. Great leaders are listeners. Great leaders are communicators. But one of the ones that gets the most play is great leaders are self-aware. I give them credit for the dashed line. I said only one word, but I'll give you credit for the hyphen with self-aware. But you brought up something else. Great leaders are genuine, right? You talk about it in your book. You have to own your brand. You own your brand. Elevate your leadership. I own my brand. Teamwork, tone, tenacity. You can't teach, right, being genuine, right? Just like height or speed, right? You can't teach it. Enthusiasm. And in the military, your subordinates will find out pretty quick if you're a phony.
Absolutely. And in the private sector.
Exactly. And they'll forgive you, either side, if you're contrite, sincere. Hey, I made a horrible mistake here. I'm sorry about that. We're going to need to retool and do this again. I'm sorry it cost us time and resources. Yeah, that happens. That's real life. But if you try and obfuscate and, cast blame and flip it some other direction, you're done in the leadership.
You're done. Everybody sees it, and people who work for you can and will get you fired.
Yeah, two things on how you'll lose a group of people trying to achieve a common goal, right? One is if you're not genuine, right? They'll see through it, and the other thing is if you don't care, right? If you don't care about them personally, collectively, they'll see through that too, and your leadership journey is done.
For sure. There's the saying, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. One of those fancy plays there. You said something else. So when you're talking about these PhDs and this kind of, this very academic approach to leadership, there's a place for that. And what I write about, what I talk about, and more importantly, what my life's experience was, there's formal education, there's experience, and then there's all these training events that we attend that are, don't fall in the larger category of formal education, but they are coordinated, very targeted events, training events. So I think there's a triad of education, training, and most importantly, experience. And it takes the proper amount of all three of those things for a leader to really be self-aware, for a leader to understand where they are in their leadership journey and what their responsibility is for those that they're leading at that moment. It takes those three things. It takes the right mix of education, experience, and training.
I love that model. I like things in threes. There are actual cognitive studies that prove, right, the human mind, works best in memorizing things and recalling things in threes, right? So whether it's that paradigm, this one, I just like the shape, right? It's a circle is a simple closed shape, but a square or anything else has got four. Three is easier, right? Simplicity is the height of sophistication, said Da Vinci.
Love that. Simplicity is the height of sophistication, said Da Vinci. There's a clip right there.
Well, I wanted to get in an Italian citation, here, with someone like you. But I also like the shape of the triangle. The classic, shape of a triangle is the pyramid, right? The Great Pyramid. And a leadership diagram, okay, the leader's here, and here's the rest of the organization, and there are more of, followers, and that, I get it. The servant leader, the leader who cares the most about everyone else, same shape, flip it on its head. The leader's still at the point. You can only have one. Yeah, you could have more, but there are fewer. But the whole balance of the organization now pivots on the leader, right? It goes unstable if the leader isn't up to the task. Whereas the classic pyramid shape, even if the leader's not getting it done, the organization may survive. But if you've got a bad leader in the servant leader model, it'll tip on its side and not be effective.
That's, I obviously, I'm familiar with servant leadership, and I actually have my own definition and my own thoughts on that. But the summary there is, I believe it is a critical component of leadership. And I've heard the analogy of flipping that triangle upside down, but I've never heard a servant leader who's the pivotal point in the organization. I just haven't heard it put that way. I really like that.
And there are role models, across the spectrum of human experience, right? From Mother Teresa and Gandhi, to Petty Officer Michael Mansour throwing himself, a Navy SEAL, killed in action on a hand grenade, but saving his fellow SEALs in combat in Iraq, as the leader, of a group of men, engaged in conflict, right? There are examples everywhere.
Yeah, there are. And I've had some wonderful SEALs on this show, on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. And, the discussions, you and I were talking earlier about, I'm going to paraphrase, but your words were, you were talking about kind of the imperfection of leadership. And can you rehash that real quick?
I'd say the goal is progress as a leader, not perfection. Tough to find the perfect leader. Sure. There are some traits that you'd like to borrow from an amalgam of leaders. That's what my green notebooks, are for. But it's the progress, not the perfection. I'm a believer that leaders are not born, right? They are taught. Sure. And some are born with some more natural skills. Back to my early TV and movie hero, tall, good-looking men. Well, that's a small subset, of leaders, right? But what can you learn from watching others, right? What could I learn from, even as a Yankee fan growing up? I learned a lot from Cal Ripken Jr. of the Orioles regarding tenacity, right? Even as an American, as I started learning about the Pacific as a more senior naval officer, I learned a lot from Lee Kuan Yew, kind of the founding father of Singapore, their first prime minister, their George Washington, if you will. So you can put these together, and I don't know that these people were born leaders, but they exercised teamwork, tone, tenacity, and may not have been a perfect equilateral triangle as well, but progress towards that end. And you talk about it as one of your 5 principal traits, of elevating your leadership, is being a learner and being part of a learning organization. And, I'm always reading, and it may be short reading on LinkedIn. It may be long reading, from friends of mine, who have written books, and, they're all valuable, and it's adding to that database.
See, that open-mindedness is critical, and that's one of the things in my workshops and in my consulting work, and even sometimes in keynotes, I emphasize, I have a set of ground rules, and I open up with ground rules, and I emphasize that open-mindedness. It doesn't matter who you are or how much you've achieved. If you want to make gains, you just have to leave the ego behind, have that open mind, and And the awakening happens now, and the gain will happen over time if you let it. You just have to allow that. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing now? And, besides adjunct at the Naval Academy, you're working with corporations and individuals, and just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, a couple of different things. I'm the president of a nonprofit board, a unique private-public partnership called the Friends of the Naval Academy's Jewish Chapel. When I was a midshipman, 1979 to 1983, there was no Jewish chapel. There were no rabbis stationed there. Religion's important to me. And since then, there have been rabbis assigned, for about the 100 or so Jewish midshipmen, and a private fundraising effort gifted the monies to the Department of the Navy to build a Jewish chapel, and it's a world-class facility. It was dedicated in 2005. And it's on the Academy grounds, but it's a unique private-public partnership. So I'm the president of a board of directors of mostly former Naval Academy graduates, not necessarily Jewish, that understand the midshipman experience, a lot of knowledge with the religious experience, and our goal is to enhance the religious and cultural lives of Jewish midshipmen. It's not religious programming, that's chaplain's business. But we're the resource sponsors and the good ideas people that, Rabbi, maybe a trip to Israel this spring break. Well, that's expensive. Well, we'll resource it. Yeah. All right, that type of work. And that's very rewarding, and it keeps me on the Naval Academy yard at night in addition to my daytime teaching. In the corporate sector,
just real quick on. So I've been to Israel twice, and you were talking about the Singaporean president. Is that what they call him, the president?
He was the prime minister, Lee Kuan Yew.
But as you were talking about that, I was thinking about Golda Meir.
Yeah, great leader.
First prime minister of the state of Israel.
Yes.
And somebody
first female prime minister.
And somebody who, Ben Gurion, I think, was the first female, but somebody who had tremendous influence. And
she was a wartime prime minister, as well, the 73, Arab-Israeli war.
Yeah. So I just wanted to hit that. You dropped some pretty big names in terms of leadership, and I thought Golda Meir was one. Okay, so back to what you're doing.
She's a great example. So in the corporate sector, I'm on several boards of advisors, one corporate boards of director, nuance between some fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. This is a NASDAQ-listed cybersecurity and IT company, and the others in the defense or intel community space. And my national security connections come in significantly there, where I can connect people with right points of contact. I can share experiences from how it's been done in the past. I keep my ear to the ground in the defense sector, in the intel community sector, through professional organizations that there may be opportunities here. And I also provide a lot of what we'd call, it's the same in the military or private sector, risk management. Here are the pros, here are the cons. Let's look at it through a methodic approach. What do we think is the better course of action as we typically would lay out? Well, here's do nothing. Here's go to thermonuclear war or the equivalent in business, or maybe we should do something in between. And the answer may be one extreme or the other. More often than not, it migrates, towards the center. But having an experienced voice of diverse professional experiences at the table. Hey, how does the military handle this, type event? I have some thoughts on this, and it adds value to the business discussions.
Yeah, and I will tell you, as a business owner and somebody with 40 people on my team, 40 people who rely on me to make good decisions, I rely on their input. I really have to hear from all my team members. And in the private sector, my private sector experience anyway, when I contrast that against my military experience, there's so many similarities and courses of action. When we have something to solve in this organization, we lay out courses of action. Here's my intent. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And risk analysis, absolutely. In the private sector, oftentimes if we're down, we say we're down month on month or year on year, first thing we look at is marketing. And more often than not, we're going to drop more dollars into marketing or retool something within the marketing department. That's kind of our, that's our 16-inch gun, if you will. And every department within my organization, we all have to move forward together and understand what it is everybody's trying to achieve.
Yeah, great leaders, right, back to the drill, great leaders are courageous. They're not foolhardy, right? That's recklessness. Cowardice is the other end of the spectrum, right? But they're not adverse to taking risk, if it's prudent risk, right? Admiral Nimitz told Admirals Fletcher and Spruance going into the decisive Battle of Midway in June of 1942, you're encouraged to take prudent risk. But we only had 3 carriers, and Nimitz put them all in play. And he thought it was prudent risk based on the value of the intelligence that his team was providing him. So, great leaders are courageous. And history and modern times, they're replete with examples. Joshua Chamberlain, out of ammunition on Little Round Top at the Battle of Gettysburg, fixed bayonets, and charged and stunned, the advancing enemy and turned the tide of that battle, which could have outflanked, the whole Union Army. Farragut, going into Mobile Bay, same war, it's a different scenario down in Mobile Bay, literally lashed with ropes to get above you've heard the fog of war, the guns smoke was, at sea level. He needed to get above it and damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, right? Not foolhardy, but his survey of the scene, his intel prep of the battle space, he thought, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Risk-taking, courageous.
Wow, great examples, incredible examples.
And you highlight this in your book, which I love, difference between leadership and management, right? I have my own definition of those as well. You know what my leadership one is. Managers do things the same, and they can be very good at it. We all need good managers. You manage things, you do things the same. Leaders in that context do things different, right? We haven't tried this before. Let's experiment here prudently. That's leadership, right? Managers don't do that. Managers just, I got the spreadsheet. You're giving me $100. It's don't spend $101. I got it. A leader will say, why can't we have $120? And let me go back to the source and see if I can get it, because a leader's principal job, right? Identify the big task. We've talked about that already. But one of the key tasks overlooked for a leader is only leaders, not the rank and file of an organization may establish relationships internal, but it's up to the leader, I think, to establish relationships extra beyond the organization.
Oh, absolutely.
The result
one of the primary
relationships is trust. And if you trust each other, you're willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt if you disagree with them. And you look at the state of modern American politics, or media, and no one trusts each other, and the relationships may be very thin, but there's no trust, and as a result, there's no loyalty, right? If I trust someone but I have a disagreement with them, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt if we see things different ways, may try it, may just agree to disagree, but it's respectful and it's courteous. And the byproduct of trust is loyalty. And you've been in units, some more loyal than others, but the best ships, squadrons, commands I was ever a part of were the ones that were most loyal to each other. They weren't the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, right? You know, the best titles, the best sunglasses, but they were the best. They had the best loyalty to each other, and that's PhD level, you know, teamwork.
Yeah, that's an incredible observation, and it is. And when you see it, and that's what you're talking about. When you see it, you're almost in awe. It's incredible. And I would go back to the EOD teams that I've been on over the course of my career. And you know, I say the teams, I'm talking tactical level, right? So at the tactical level where we might want to kill each other because we disagree over something, that loyalty supersedes.
The Wright brothers to each other, it helps that they were, you know, blood brothers.
Yeah.
Lewis and Clark, you know, and their Corps of Discovery, you know, going into the Louisiana Territory. You know, these are examples. And General McChrystal talks about it in his book, Team of Teams. He took over command of the Joint Special Operations Command. So you have, you know, Green Berets, Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, Air Force, soft pilots. It didn't mean they trusted each other, and he inherited an organization where that was an area that they needed to work together. They built that trust and exercised a whole bunch of different things that made that work, and the result in the long run was loyalty, and, you know, arguably the most elite, you know, team, elite fighting force team, you know, that the U.S. has ever seen.
Yeah, under JSOC, absolutely. Fascinating discussion. Folks, if you are enjoying this discussion with U.S. Navy Admiral Paul Becker, retired, and I hope you are, because I am truly a fascinating discussion, and you want to hear more great leadership discussions, tune into my YouTube channel, Elevate Your Leadership, same as the title of the podcast, same as the title of my book, Elevate Your Leadership. Tune into my YouTube channel, and you'll find many other fascinating discussions with leaders and people who have done some pretty amazing things throughout the course of their life. Paul, is there a book at some point authored by Admiral Paul Becker?
I expect it to be out in 2024. And not surprisingly, Teamwork, Tone, Tenacity will be in the title, and will shape it. And these are leadership lessons I learned in uniform, but they apply, you know, to the private and public sector as well. And there are inspirational T3 examples, both real and fictional. I write about them on a near daily basis on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And some are shorter than others, you know, Twitter.
X.
Now I'm so yesterday, you know, here. Yes.
Get with the times, Admiral.
I'm always on the lookout, and sometimes I write about leaders who inspire and motivate, and they're everywhere. Sports, politics, media, entertainment. Like last week, Tony Bennett, when it passed away. A World War II Army veteran, by the way. Talk about teamwork. He joined the greatest team ever, right? You know, the U.S. Military. But he also had some great teamworks with Lady Gaga and, you know, and other artists like that. And he was fabulously, his tone, optimistic, you know, one of his hit songs, The Best Is Yet to Come. And his tenacity, he charted records, right, on the Billboard's tops over 6 decades, right? You know, so that's resolve and staying power. So there's an example. So, you know, God rest his soul. He passed away, you know, just recently. So, hey, that's today's teamwork, tone, tenacity lesson. Let's take a look at Tony Bennett, right? You know, but whether it may be Happy Gilmore, since you're such a Boston Bruins fan, right? You know, now I mentioned my irreverent sense of humor from reading too many Mad magazines, but Happy, for example, team player with Chubbs, his caddy. He's a member of grandma is, his family is everything, right? His tone, he realized he needed to calm down his, anger management, right? And his tenacity, he stuck with it, right, till he got his putting game, in there. So you can look at, it's epic. So there are leadership lessons everywhere, practically every day of the year I write on these topics.
Wow, that's incredible. That's so short, some short, some long.
Yeah, some short stories, some long stories, books you mentioned, things I read, great lessons. I mentioned General McChrystal's Team of Teams. There's, from a tone perspective, General Colin Powell, he's written books on leadership. Also, his autobiography is a great lesson in tone. Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, from Facebook, a real groundbreaker there. And then tenacity, loads of examples from World War II submarine heroes like Eugene Fluke, a Medal of Honor winner, to Ernest Shackleton, whose famous expedition to the Antarctic, ice wrecked, in the early 20th century. And he brought every one of his crew after months of being ice wrecked in Antarctica.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Actually, I heard or read somewhere that some of his crew, when it was obvious they were going to return to society, they didn't want to. They were enjoying the experience with Shackleton.
And I mentioned Admiral Stockdale earlier, Medal of Honor winner, there's a collection of his essays and speeches called Thoughts of a Philosophic Fighter Pilot. And it's just that. It's a collection of his essays and speeches. And it's for any organization, leader of high-performing teams, this is one to take Admiral Stockdale's lessons to heart.
And what, could you say the title of that book again?
Yeah, Thoughts of a Philosophic Fighter Pilot.
Thoughts of a Philosophic Fighter Pilot. Folks,
and that's what he was. He was a fighter pilot shot down over Vietnam and became the leader by seniority, but also by his actions, right? There was no cognitive dissonance. Some leaders will say one thing and do another thing. That's, textbook, academic cognitive dissonance. When they match, right? That's a person of integrity in my book. Integrity in the sense that the words and the actions are integrated. There's no say-do mismatch. Those are leaders that people will follow, right? That's a person of integrity, right? Doesn't matter your background, a person of integrity, and Stockdale was certainly one of them, but you could think of, many examples.
Sure, but you just listed probably 3 or 4 books that are of great value. And I know I'm going to get Admiral Stockdale's book. That'll be next on my list. I've got probably 6 to go before I get to it, but that's going to be next on my list. Paul, what a fascinating discussion, and you and I are both so bought into, the kind of 360 omnidirectional view and approach to leadership that we could talk until tomorrow. And after the podcast, we might just do that. But what haven't I asked you that you think is of great value that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, it's an emphasis that you can find leadership examples to motivate, inspire you to improve your performance all the time. So in no particular order, I jotted down a list of, examples of, boy, what does this person have? Think to yourself, and you could read about it, from my website, which is thebeckerT3group.com. There's a blog there where these are entered, but on a near daily basis, I have a bias, I have to say, towards putting in naval heroes, right? So It could be Stockdale, I mentioned. There's Jacques Cousteau. There's John Paul Jones. There's Admiral Hyman Rickover, the father of our nuclear navy. There are business people. There's Liz Claiborne and Estee Lauder and Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. And all of them are not the perfect, teamwork, tone, tenacity. Jobs in particular. He was not someone that was your buddy. But he was driven. Thomas Edison was the same way historically. Stay out of his way at times, but there was no doubt he had a vision and he was tireless and he knew how to build networks to get to where he was going, right? But I wouldn't say he was an empathetic, Yeah, that's right. So I've talked about some other political and statesman type leaders. So push back from the table every now and then and say, if I'm looking for a leadership role model, what did I see today, or who do I admire, and what do they have? And it's simple for me to put it into the bins of teamwork, tone, tenacity, and these are people who I still derive my motivation and inspiration from.
That's great. That's great. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast and sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your energy. People tell me I'm very energetic, and I'm telling you, you are very energetic. And congratulations on your success.
Yeah.
So, real quick again, how can people find you?
Yeah, my website, thebeckerT3group.com. For an email directly, paul@thebeckerT3group.com. And my websites, you could find me on LinkedIn, Paul Becker, or the T3group.com. Same with Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
We got it. Paul Becker, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.